Hey guys, NJ here. Welcome back to the channel. Been a little while. I have here the new, or relatively new, OMP M2 Evo. Now, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the OMP M2 and the M1. I've had a very long relationship over many decades with RC helicopters, which has of course been up and down. When I first learned to fly RC helicopters, it was yeah, long before even simulators were around, and you learnt by flying them and often by crashing them, which was a very expensive and horrible affair. But if you look at one of my old videos, you'll know I'm a huge fan of not only how wonderfully robust the M2 series of helicopters and the M1 are, but also how well they perform, how cheap they are to keep maintained and in the air. There's just a lot of great things. I strongly recommend having a look at one of those older videos if you want some context for this new guy. I've been very eagerly anticipating spending some time with this, the M2 Evo, and this really is, I think people were a little surprised when this came out, because people were hoping that there was there was footage and test footage of an M5, a 500 sized OMP helicopter, and that hasn't materialized yet, but I mean the test footage is allegedly real. I think they're still working on it, but in the meantime, hey, no complaints from me. This M2 Evo has come out, which is, I think the best way to describe this is a refinement. It's not a straight up new model. It shares an awful lot with its predecessor, and there were two predecessors really. There was the M2 Pro model, and then there was also the not the Evo, the Explore. That's what it was called. So the Pro and the Explore. The Explore being the slightly cheaper version with a few more kind of plasticky parts on it, although they were a carbon plastic, I think, which was kept the parts down, allowed the helicopter to be a little bit cheaper, more affordable, more of a crasher. I ended up with both, of course. And we'll have a little look at those in compared to this one. But what are the main features about this new one? Well, as always, the canopy, they've redesigned the colour scheme, similar material, nice and lightweight, that kind of hard plastic, like a vacuum form plastic. The finish is just beautiful. They don't skimp on the finish, and even the rigidity once it's in place is really very good. These are quite hard wearing canopies and very affordable, because say up on my bigger helicopters, canopies can run you up to, like, £150 really for a good fiberglass canopy. So these being around 15 to 20 for a canopy of this quality, very pleased with it. It shares an awful lot, in a good way, with one of the other models, and this is something I've seen, or rather haven't seen talked about too much in other reviews, is the fact that so many parts on this helicopter are interchangeable. Over in the Heli Freaks forum, one of the main testers, Jonas, who has a very close working relationship with OMP, has been very good in providing lots of details throughout this development, giving us sneak peeks, and then of course once it turned up, everyone who's already got an M2 and in those forums would ask loads of questions. Jonas is brilliant in answering all of them, but one of the things he mentioned was actually a question that I asked after I've already had a small incident with this one and put it back together. But I did ask, a lot of these parts look very similar to that of the M2 Pro, and I said, are some of these parts interchangeable? And Jonas said, yes, actually an awful lot of these parts are interchangeable, which is it's fantastic, because I've got a lot of spares for my M2s. The only difference on this particular model being that these have a kind of a shiny finish, polished finish I should say, whereas the Explore and the Pro have more of a kind of a powdery kind of blasted finish, so more matte looking, but the actual part is identical, completely interchangeable, and as I said, a lot of the parts in this helicopter are. And in fact, you can go through and, for instance, take your Pro or your Explore, and if you just want to upgrade to the longer tail boom, you can do so. If you want to upgrade the tail rotor system, you want to go for the motor with the larger tail blade, you can do that too. The actual speed controllers on these are exactly the same, so I'm told, in terms of their power handling. So there's no need to even upgrade your controller. You can do a straight swap. They are running different motors, and we'll have a little look again at the two side by side. But we've got a much bigger tail rotor here, obviously running at a different kV, wider stator, so this is going to be slightly more torque, and we've got a bigger disc this time, so slightly larger disc, again different setup motor, all running the same power levels. They're both or they're all 3S helicopters, but the battery is about 100 milliamp bigger than it was. I think instead of 650 it's 750 or 550 or 650. I can't remember which of those two it is, but yeah, the battery is slightly bigger. One of the biggest changes between this and the old M2, in fact, let me get one here to show you. I've got my Pro here, albeit with a different canopy. Here's my Pro. I've got this. This is over from Scotia RC in the UK. Stock these, by the way. This micro heli adapter. Comes with these adapter carbon sides here, and this it looks very much like a mini Goblin like this, which I thought was quite cool. So for my Pro I put this canopy on it, but you can see you can really see the difference between these two finishes here, but you can see the parts themselves. Those blade grips, for instance, are absolutely identical. It's just the finish. But one of the big differences that they've changed between the new Evo and the old Pro and Explore is on the old models they had a DFC set up for the flybarless head, and without doing a big video on DFC versus the sort of more traditional flybarless setup with washout arms, washout mixer, you've got something, it's not a mixer, it's just washout arms, sorry, which is essentially, it's an anti-rotation for the top half of the swash plate. That's essentially what these two systems are doing in different ways. But if you look at the DFC, what they've done is essentially they make a hinge here so that this can't move this way or this way. It's basically locked to be 90 degrees. Now, by doing this, it keeps the upper part of the swash plate in sync, and that's the theory, that's how it works. It keeps the upper part of the swash plate completely in sync, because if there was nothing to hold this still, then this top part of the swash plate could rotate round, much like it could on this one. Let me see if I can show you a little bit of a close-up here, where you've just got a standard ball joint here. That top half of that swash could just spin round and become out of phase with the blade grips, which would obviously cause horrific problems and just almost instantly cause a crash as well. So these washout arms here essentially hold this top half of the swash plate exactly in position. So therefore there's no need to enforce that DFC style head here. But you can see there's a few more parts, there's a bit more metal, it's a slightly heavier system. I mean, we're talking a gram or two, you know, it's not very much, probably less, probably like 1.5 grams worth of extra parts. But you can see there's quite a lot more complication, there's more bearings, there's more stuff going on by having this. Instead, you can see it's much simpler like this, using this DFC system. Where it is that is kept in phase just by using this large hinge here, which can't move laterally that way. And to be honest with you, I mean, I'm not a crazy good 3D pilot. I can do a fair bit of 3D. I can throw the helicopter around. I have fun with it, which, you know, we'll be doing a flight video with this. Not this video. I've only had a chance to kind of hover it and check it out. I've still got to really properly program it and tune it outside. So we will do a proper flight video, probably a couple coming up soon. But the issue is that the rotor head sitting in the grommet, so it's got two grommets holding the feathering shaft, which are holding these blade grips together. Now, those grommets are a hard type of rubber, and they do allow the whole feathering shaft to teeter slightly, and that's a necessary component of rotor dynamics. You need to be able to, that needs to be able to move. The problem is, and obviously it's too stiff for me to really be able to show you in here, as these blades let's say the blades which are being held along this axis tilt like that, the problem is that this can actually, as it tilts, imagine this is now your fulcrum, your center of rotation, it can actually tilt and move this slightly out of phase. So as the blades flap around and move that feathering shaft in those grommets, this can go in and out of phase. That can cause wobbliness and not very nice things to happen. And when you get the blades flapping a lot, especially at low RPM, that's where you can get some of that unwanted kind of flight characteristics of DFC. If you always run at a high head speed, it doesn't really matter that much. You're never really going to see it that much. But yeah, it does cause issues at the lower RPMs, the DFC head. But, you know, it's still, I run this low to medium head speeds more than I do high, and it's always flown fantastically. I really have no complaints, to the point where I would personally be changing it to the more higher part count, more complicated setup. However, OMP, to their credit, and their flight testers like Jonas, are always chasing perfection and good flight characteristics at all RPMs, and so they have chosen to go for this system instead with the washout arms, which will basically lock that no matter what the head is doing in terms of how it's teetering inside of those feathering shaft grommets. So that gives you a little idea of why they've gone that route. Looking under the hood, this one is considerably easier to take off than the one I've got on that micro heli canopy. It's a bit more of a pain to get off. The flight controller firmware, I think the board apparently has been updated, and it does feel slightly different. As I said, the speed controllers are rated exactly the same, but there is some new firmware in this and a new board, I believe, and it does feel slightly different. I did try copying my settings straight over to this one, and it didn't feel quite right. I knew it would feel a little strange in terms of the flight characteristics with a slightly bigger disc and, you know, more authority on the tail rotor. I'd need to retune it from scratch, which I will. But on the whole, you know, it's more or less more of the same that we had the last time, and does an equally great job of giving a really wonderful feeling flying helicopter in terms of stability for beginners, and in terms of responsiveness. I mean, you can really tune this thing up to be mega agile. And fly it ballistically for 3 minutes, or you can just hover it and get, like, you know, anywhere up to 9 minutes out of it. It's an incredibly versatile machine. But it flies, you know, this was the big thing about this helicopter for me, is it flies so much bigger than it has any right to do. You know, my favorite size of helicopter has always been the 500s, because anything smaller than that has always felt a little bit unsure, gets blown around a little bit, had, you know, odd gyroscopic effects, and it just never felt that great. This thing, however, I mean, honestly, out of the, you know, I don't even want to think about how many helicopters I've bought over the years, but out of all of them, if I had to just throw something in the car, go out and have a great time with minimal hassle, hardly take up any room, don't have to worry about taking out starting equipment or masses of chargers or whatever, it's going to be the M2 every time. The frame design has changed somewhat. Now they've done this, you see here, like, you've got different set, you've got like a lower section, and then the separator blocks, and then the upper section, and it, you know, it's a great, very solid frame design on the M2, the M2 V2, the Pro and the Explore, but this new design has it's designed to reduce part count, and I can see why they've done that. And in fact, there's some quite nice, I love it when little structural things are done like that. So this carbon lower plate is actually bending in, which gives fantastic rigidity. You know, there's little design aspects which I really like, the engineering that's gone into this, but it basically all mounts these lower frames to this one solid aluminium block up the top here, rather than having separate sections. So I really like that. They've dropped the so with the Explore model, sorry, I mean, my brain losing it between all these different models here, had the plastic, they're plastic housed servos with metal gears, right? In the Pro model, the M2 V2, here you can see they're actually metal cases. Now, again, I can see why they've done it, because the Explore had these ones, never had an issue. Every time I broke a servo arm, it still performed perfectly with a new servo arm on it. Metal Gears will do that for you. They're a great idea in helicopters. And yeah, both are great, but really this is nothing more than for the bling over here. It doesn't, you know, and it's slightly heavier. So I can see why they chose for this new Evo to go back to the Explore like. So it's taking sort of the best bits of each model actually. So that's the thing. And again, it works great. I should say, in the crash that I did have, I did break the servo arms, and that is by design. Okay, the servo arms aren't metal, they're plastic. I'll get you a little bit of a closer look. There you go. And these are designed to break because when you're in a crash with a helicopter and you've got so much, you know, rotating mass, and there's just so much that's just ready to explode, that's carrying tons of energy. That energy in a crash has to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere, and it will resonate and go backwards and forwards and end up bending something. It will transfer to somewhere. If it can't bend somewhere, it will just pass the energy on to something else, to the next weakest part. And the idea is in a crash that these snap, that the plastic servo arms snap. They're rigid enough to do their job precisely in flight, but they're weak enough to be the point of failure. And they're the cheapest part to replace. So, you know, again, great design choices there. But I will say that is one slight downside for me, is that this setup with the washout arms instead of the DFC head, I found does more damage and bends more things. It's a more rigid rotated system, which gives you more precision. It gives you better flight characteristics, but it transfers more energy to more parts and causes more things to bend and break. So I found I'm generally replacing more parts in a crash here than I was with the two DFC versions I had. And even between this and the V2 and the Explore, which I've got down here, and immediately when you see this, anyone who's got one of these helicopters is going to have questions now. There's my Explore. You can see the swash plate on the Explore. The lower part is plastic, again to keep it cheaper. That was an absolutely fantastic shock absorber. The amount of crashes I've had with this without breaking anything far outweighs this, and definitely outweighs this. So and you know, there's the argument of, well, the all metal swash is more precise than the carbon infused plastic lower swash of this one. I've never found, certainly to my ability, and you know, my friend who's a really good 3D pilot couldn't tell either. We couldn't tell a flight difference between these two. If it was my choice, and again, you could do this if you want, you could put that swash on this. And I know there's that bling factor of, oh, I don't want to do that, it's so shiny and metal and beautiful. You know, if you're not like a mega high precision 3D flyer and you want to not break as many parts, I would wager that plastic lower from the Explore model would benefit being on there. That's just my, that's my 2 cents. And I know there are people who are going to strongly disagree with that. But yeah, anyway, and that's through owning all these models, crashing all these models. So this is collected data. It's not me just popping a guess at this stuff. I can't believe how many times I've stuffed this in and it just gets up and flies again. But yes, the question that you probably had, just very quickly, you'll see there's a custom tail on this one. So my good friend Sheldon from Drone Doctor and I sat down over many nights designing a 3D printable tail. We came up with this design. I did a hand painted job on it, a pretty good job on the colour match, if I say so myself, which adds about 7 grams. And if you're sort of light 3D and sport flying, it really, doesn't make any difference. I know Jonas is, if he sees this video, he's going to say it does make a difference. I mean, for someone of his skill, yeah, fair play, Jonas. But for me, I love it. It made it so much nicer to look at in the air. and it felt faster. I mean, it's probably a psychological thing, but you know, doing speed runs, it looks like a proper speed heli setup. It's a beautiful looking thing with that tail. But yeah, we still might do some tweaks to this, but that's actually 3D printed in Vase mode. And it's actually very robust. Again, it's been through some crashes, done quite well that. But yes, anyway, let me get rid of some of these helicopters. They're starting to clutter the desk here. Let's talk about a few more bits and pieces here. So what else has changed? So we got a new battery. And compared to the old one, let me see, was I right? Yeah, so 750 milliamp instead of 650 milliamp. Obviously raising the capacity and a slightly higher C level, although we should all know by now that the C rating is just a made up marketing thing. But yeah, slightly higher capacity, you can pull a little more from it. So, you know, it'll sustain the amps a little bit better when you go up in capacity. But yeah, I mean, even on these, the official OMP batteries, I've never gone off brand. They just work perfectly. They've changed. Instead, on the old one, they had a mounting plate which clicked in. With the new one, again, they've ditched all that for weight saving. And they've literally gone with a kind of friction fit. You can see at the back, there is a stopper here. I can't actually get around this. It's really hard behind the camera to see what I'm doing. Yeah, there's a stopper back there. See it? So that will stop the battery from, you know, sliding into the motor. And then there's simply a bar with two rubber grommets on there. And it's just as simple as that. Such a good idea. And that just clicks into place, and yeah, nice and tight, not going anywhere. Works really well. Very much like that. And you don't have to then go and buy loads of those battery trays and then strap them to it. Although the click in and out system's cool, it's really unnecessary for a helicopter of this size. In terms of, now I've rebuilt it a couple of times, it's about the same in terms of unscrewing stuff. Everything's pretty much the same hex size. So yeah, that's all pretty straightforward. Flight characteristics, you know, I've just had a bit of a feel for it from hovering it. It feels great, stable, all the wonderful things that the old one did. But I'm certainly, I haven't had a chance to throw it around yet to really get to know it. But of course, you can see they have, with the larger disc, made the boom longer and gone with a more powerful tail motor, certainly a more torquey tail motor. With a bigger tail blade. Now I mean I have managed to get my old M2 to blow out, and for any of you old school enough to remember a 3D move called the death spiral, I still love doing those, but a death spiral is literally putting the helicopter on its side, so you're hovering nice and high, you put it on its side, it free falls down, the tail has to keep the helicopter dead level as it accelerates towards the ground at, like, you know, near terminal velocity. Whilst you're doing that, you're pulling full back or forward elevator, so the helicopter's actually rotating this way. I've got enough room to show you a rotation, but it's rotating this way whilst falling, and then you know, recover to inverted, you know, a few feet off the ground. It looks awesome. Real old school maneuver that, but I still think they're really fun. But I did manage to get the tail blowout doing that. So on the old one, I will definitely be trying on the new one, and I think this one will fare much better. So if we look at the, let's have a look at the new one, the old one rather, you can see there is a pretty, it's really hard without them being completely next to each other to see the difference. I mean, it's a less aerodynamic, it's less of a kind of traditional prop. It's got like the bull nose ends on it, and it's just yeah, it's functional. You can see the stator's definitely smaller here. Again, you can see, look, all these parts interchangeable between the old and the new. I'm sure somewhere on the HeliFreak forum there's a list of all the things that are interchangeable between the two models. But yeah, you can pretty much upgrade that one to this one if you wanted to do so. But you can see, yeah, we got a bigger stator, torquier. And then, yeah, much nicer, more aerodynamic looking prop, much more like a traditional prop design. And it certainly felt very responsive. Oh, there you go. Look, that'll give you a much better view. You can really appreciate the difference there, looking at them down the lens. But yeah, I'm expecting this one to cope with my nasty death spirals a lot better now. And the other thing that I noticed as well, so it's just braced. There's just one bolt up here, which you loosen with a thread lock bolt on the other side. And then this will very easy to adjust the length. Oh, I heard of someone that had a crash, and all they did, because it broke off right there, was they literally just took the other part out, slid the boom in a little bit and redid the bolt up and went flying again, which is quite cool. Whether that's by accident or design, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, on the whole, as I said, it's a refinement. Everything's been very nicely refined. I'm still using the S-Bus controller that plugs in the side here. One thing I do know is because I don't use the bind and fly model, I use my TX16S. An S-Bus, but I know the new OMP Hobby controller is significantly better than the old one. If you're new to the hobby and you wanted to get one of these as a package deal with a controller, that's very much worth looking at. But yeah, there's not too much more for me to say about this right now, because I need to go out and do some flight testing. But we've had a good natter for half an hour. You can see the differences between the two, and I am already a huge fan. I will have probably already put a little bit of that, just that hover footage that I put in there, but obviously I can't tell you too much from that. It does sound a bit different. That slightly bigger disc, the motors being slightly it's got a different noise about it. Sounds a little more serious. I prefer it. It's a little less whiny, especially that tail doesn't whine quite as much as the other one. The other one does. The M1's just hilarious. It sounds like a mosquito going nuts. But this one just everything sounds a little bit nicer. As I said, it's all just a really nice refinement. If you were to choose between, should I get an M2 Explore, an M2 V2, the Pro one, or should you get the Evo? So you got three models to consider here. I would honestly say go straight to this one, because it's got the best of both and it's got some really nice upgrades. And from everything I've seen and from everything I'm hearing, until I've done my flight test anyway, it seems like the flight performance is absolutely stellar as well. I really think this is good. If you want to go on, I mean, for me, the one it makes redundant is the M2 V2. And the reason I say that is because the Explore is just that bit cheaper. It flies exactly the same. Fight me. I do believe that there's very little difference between the two. It flies fantastically. The Explore, which is down here, that we had a brief look at. Not with our custom tail design, obviously, but you get the idea. The Explorer, I think, if you just get into, you want to spend as little as possible, this is a great, absolutely fantastic helicopter. I would recommend that. If you want to go for the premium model, I would go to this without a doubt. It really is very good. Anyway, well, there will be lots more to follow on this helicopter, so stay tuned. And I will be back with some flight video before you know it. Thanks for sticking around. If you have till the end, please like and subscribe. It all helps out. And say hi in the comments. If I haven't spoken to you for ages, it'd be really nice to see some of you are still out there. Take care for now.